Roland TR-808 was supposed to be a failure. Released in 1980, the drum machine sold poorly and was discontinued just 3 years later. But in 1982, in a small Belgian studio, Marvin Gaye discovered the TR-808 and heard something no one else had: freedom. For a man evading the IRS, buried in alimony payments to 2 ex-wives, and too paranoid to trust session musicians, the TR-808 was revolutionary. Marvin could create an entire rhythm track on his own, free from the constraints of Motown producers or Berry Gordy's approval. He programmed the rhythms himself, layered them with a Fender Rhodes electric piano and Hammond organ, and built what would become Sexual Healing entirely on his own. When Rolling Stone writer David Ritz came to Ostend, Marvin had an unusual large collection of sadomasochism comic books. Ritz jokingly said, "You need sexual healing," and the title was born. At the 1983 Grammy Awards, Marvin was playing those TR-808 rhythms live and crying. The machine had saved him. But returning to America meant returning to the house where his father would pull the trigger. Don't miss the rest of this story. Remember to subscribe. On the freezing mornings of January 1982, Marvin Gaye watched the grey waves of the North Sea and asked himself the same question every day: how did I sink so deep? The modest studio apartment in the Belgian town of Ostend was the last refuge for one of the most famous voices in the United States. The Internal Revenue Service was demanding over $7 million in back taxes. His ex-wife, Anna Gordy, Berry Gordy's sister, had taken him to court over alimony. His second wife, Janice, had doubled the cost of the divorce. And Motown Records, Marvin's most trusted home, had stolen and edited his unfinished In Our Lifetime album without his permission and released it. Marvin called this the greatest betrayal an artist can suffer, and ended their 21-year relationship. But what would he do now? At 42, his career seemed over. His cocaine addiction had damaged his vocal cords. His fear of live performances had kept him off the stage, and he could no longer set foot in America because he would be arrested the moment he did. A local disc jockey and concert promoter named Freddie Cousiert had lured him to Ostend, promising he could recover quietly there. Marvin accepted because he had no other choice. Studio Katie was a small recording studio in one of Ostend's suburbs, unremarkable from the outside. Marvin didn't like it when he first arrived. He was used to the glamour of the Motown studios in Hitsville, USA, and the professional equipment in Los Angeles. But in mid-February, he made the most important discovery of his career: the Roland TR-808, sitting in the corner. When the sound engineer introduced the device, he said, "Nobody likes it. It makes a very artificial sound." Marvin thought the exact opposite. That artificial sound offered him an autonomy that no producer, no session musician could interfere with. Marvin spent hours playing with the 808's buttons, trying out different patterns, fiddling with tempo settings. Gordon Banks and Odell Brown, 2 musicians left over from Marvin's UK tour, were still staying with him in Ostend. The 3 of them started working on a reggae-inspired instrumental. Marvin sat down at the Fender Rhodes, adding slow, emotional chords from the Hammond organ. Brown worked on the bass parts. And underneath it all, holding everything together, was the 808's electronic, mechanical, yet equally human rhythm. The song had no lyrics yet, just a feeling, a rhythm, an atmosphere. When David Ritz arrived in March, Marvin's studio was filled with pornographic comic books. Ritz wanted to write Marvin's biography for Rolling Stone and had managed to come to Ostend despite Freddie Cousert's rule that no music critic can talk to Marvin. Ritz heard Marvin mention Amsterdam's red light district and jokingly said, "You need sexual healing." Marvin stopped. He asked again, "What did you say?" Ritz explained, "Sexual healing, you know, healing through sex." Marvin closed his eyes and nodded. "That's a song title. Write a poem. I'll take care of the melody." Ritz objected. He wasn't a lyricist. But Marvin insisted, and Ritz scribbled a few lines. Marvin took them, went into the studio, and recorded his first vocal demos that night. His voice was still powerful, but it was no longer the smooth, clean tone of his Motown days. Now it was cracked, emotional, fragile. Cocaine and alcohol had left their mark on his vocal cords, but strangely, this new voice perfectly suited the sexuality and fragility of sexual healing. In April, Marvin finished his work with the Roland TR-808 and knew he had something extraordinary in front of him. But he had a problem. He was no longer with Motown and needed to find a new record label. CBS Records, the parent company of Columbia, was interested. They wanted to sign Marvin Gaye, who had left Berry Gordy, but the negotiations dragged on. In March 1982, the deal was finally signed. CBS agreed to pay off part of Marvin's debts and offer him a 3-album contract. For Marvin, this wasn't a second chance, but perhaps his last. In May, Marvin learned that his mother, Alberta Gaye, was battling bone cancer in a Los Angeles hospital. His heart broke. His exile in Ostend prevented him from seeing his mother, but there was an IRS arrest warrant. If he returned to the U.S., he could end up in jail. Marvin took the risk anyway. In October 1982, he returned to America for his mother. His lawyers worked to protect him, and Marvin was able to stay briefly in Los Angeles with his mother. Just then, in the second week of October 1982, CBS Records released "Sexual Healing" as a single. The reaction was immediate. Radio stations began playing the song. In November, it reached #1 on Billboard's Black Singles chart and remained at the top for 10 weeks, a record for any single in the 1980s. It then moved to the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed to #3. Marvin Gaye hadn't had a hit this big in 10 years. The Midnight Love album was released in November and also immediately reached #1. It went platinum. Critics showered it with praise. Rolling Stone called it the most honest and sexual work of Marvin Gaye's career. But the strange thing was, Marvin couldn't celebrate his success. While spending time with his mother at his Los Angeles home, IRS agents were waiting for him outside. His lawyers had secured a temporary agreement, but Marvin couldn't move freely. In December 1982, "Sexual Healing" went gold with sales of 1 million copies. The RIAA ceremony was held, but Marvin couldn't attend because appearing in public would have been risky. By February 1983, everything had changed for Marvin. The Grammy Awards were approaching, and "Sexual Healing" was nominated in 2 categories: Best Male R&B Vocal Performance and Best R&B Instrumental Performance. Marvin had been nominated for a Grammy 10 times, but had never won. This time, he felt it would be different. But there was a problem. The Grammy ceremony would be held in Los Angeles at the Shrine Auditorium, and if Marvin appeared there, the media would go wild. The IRS would also focus on him. His lawyers warned him, "Don't go, it's too risky." But Marvin thought of his mother. Alberta Gaye was in the hospital and wanted to see her son win a Grammy. Marvin made up his mind. He would go, not just to receive the award, but to perform. He would sing "Sexual Healing" live on television in front of millions of people. This was his declaration of return to America. The exile was over. February 23, 1983, 7:30 p.m. The backstage corridors of the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles were filled with famous names. Michael Jackson was at the top with "Thriller." Lionel Richie was everywhere. Toto was taking the music by storm with "Africa." But all eyes were on Marvin Gaye because no one had seen him in so long. Backstage, Marvin sat alone in a room, staring at the wall through his glasses. His hands were shaking. It wasn't cocaine this time. At least he had used very little that night. It was nerves. He would be on the Grammy stage for the first time in 10 years, and he wasn't sure if his voice still had its old power. Gordon Banks opened the door. "Marvin, it's time to go on stage." Marvin got up, buttoned his jacket, and stepped into the hallway. He prayed silently as he walked. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a preacher, and Marvin had rebelled against him, entering the world of rock and roll. But now, as he stepped onto that Grammy stage, the religious education he had received from his father came to mind. "God, this is my last chance. Don't let me fail." When the stage lights came on, Marvin took the microphone and began Sexual Healing. But this wasn't the studio version. This was live, raw, vulnerable. Marvin's voice cracked on the first note, but he continued. By the second verse, his eyes were teary. By the third verse, tears were streaming down his cheeks. The audience noticed. The cameras zoomed in. Marvin was crying. He was crying on live television, in front of millions of people, on the Grammy stage. But his voice was powerful. That cracked, emotional tone was the essence of sexual healing. When the song ended, the audience stood up. Applause thundered. Marvin left the stage, but his eyes were still teary. Backstage, Gordon Banks hugged him. "You're amazing, man. You're amazing." Marvin nodded but couldn't speak. Then the awards ceremony began. When the first category was announced, the winner of the Best Male R&B Vocal Performance Award, Marvin Gaye, Sexual Healing. Marvin returned to the stage. He accepted the Grammy. He held the golden gramophone in his hands and looked at the audience. "This is my first Grammy," he said. "It took 43 years, but it finally happened. Thank you." His voice was breaking. A few minutes later, the second award came. Best R&B Instrumental Performance, Marvin Gaye, Sexual Healing. 2 Grammys. Same night, same song. Marvin had made history. But the night wasn't over. When the ceremony ended, Marvin went to the hospital. He wanted to see his mother. Alberta Gaye sat in her hospital bed, having watched her son on television. When Marvin entered the room, his mother cried, "My son, I'm so proud." Marvin knelt down and held his mother's hand. "It's all for you, Mom. It's all for you." That night, Marvin left his Grammy Awards in his mother's hospital room. "These are yours," he said. "I just carried them for you." The next day, the media went wild. Every newspaper talked about Marvin's tears and his Grammy victory. Rolling Stone put him on the cover, Marvin Gaye's Miraculous Comeback. Billboard gave him the Breakthrough Artist of the Year award. But Marvin was uneasy reading these accolades because the IRS was still after him. His lawyers were trying to work out a deal, but the debt was too large. Marvin's Grammy triumph gave him breathing room, but it didn't solve the problem. In April 1983, Marvin made a decision. He would go on a concert tour. The Sexual Healing Tour would be his first tour in 4 years. Marvin was afraid of performing live. He had suffered stage trauma after Tammy Terrell collapsed in his arms in 1967 and died in 1970. But now, emboldened by his Grammy victory, he was looking for a way to pay off his debt. The tour began on April 18th at Humphreys Concerts by the Bay in San Diego. Marvin was 2 weeks past his 44th birthday. When he took the stage, the audience went wild. 51 concerts were planned. Many were sold out. In May, he performed 6 consecutive nights at Radio City Music Hall in New York, breaking Barry Manilow's 5-night record. A party was held for him at Studio 54. Even his ex-wife Janice joined. Him on tour, but left after a violent argument in Miami. Throughout the tour, Marvin changed costumes 3 times during each concert. During Sexual Healing, he would come on stage in silk pajamas and a robe. He would slowly take off the robe and open the top of his pajamas. At some shows, he would joke to the audience, "I'm going to unbutton my pants, but then they'll think I'm Prince, so I'll button them back up." The audience would laugh and scream. But something dark was growing inside Marvin. As the tour progressed, Marvin's cocaine use increased. He had managed to stay sober during his exile in Belgium, but when he returned to America, his old habits returned. There were lines of cocaine backstage. His voice began to weaken during concerts. In July, at a concert in Texas, Marvin almost collapsed on stage from exhaustion. By August, the tour felt like torture to him. At the end of every show, he told the audience the same thing: "I'll probably retire from music and become a priest like my father." Some people thought he was joking, but Marvin was serious. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a Pentecostal preacher and had always seen Marvin as a sinner. Marvin's rock and roll, his devil's music, was an insult to his father. The father-son relationship had been strained for years, but Marvin still wanted his father's approval. "Maybe if I become a pastor, my father will forgive me," he thought. The tour ended on August 14, 1983, at the Pacific Amphitheater in California. Marvin looked tired and hopeless as he left the stage. His manager asked, "Marvin, are you okay?" Marvin didn't answer. He just walked away. After the tour, Marvin returned to his home in Gramercy Park, Los Angeles. His mother and father were there too. Alberta was still battling cancer. Marvin Gaye Sr. was a retired preacher, but in his old age he had become a grumpy and angry man. Starting in October 1983, tensions at home escalated. Marvin was using cocaine and alcohol. His father constantly criticized him. His mother tried to mediate, but she was unsuccessful. In December, Marvin became depressed. He was getting concert offers but turned them all down. He wasn't going to the studio. He just sat at home, fought with his father, and used cocaine. In January 1984, Marvin bought a gun. He told his manager it was for self-defense. But some of his friends were worried. "Is Marvin going to kill himself?" they asked. In February, Marvin said something strange to his mother. "Mom, I think I'm going to leave soon." Alberta was scared. "What do you mean, son?" Marvin smiled. "I don't know, just a feeling." By March, the house was a powder keg. Marvin and his father fought almost every day. Alberta was caught in the middle. On March 31st, loud music was playing from Marvin's bedroom. His father was annoyed and asked him to turn it off. Marvin refused. His father yelled louder. Marvin went upstairs and confronted his father. Saturday morning, April 1st, 1984. It was the day after Marvin Gaye's 45th birthday, but there would be no celebration. Around noon, a violent fight broke out between Marvin and his father. The details are unclear because there were only 3 people in the house: Marvin, his father, and his mother, Alberta. The exact cause of the fight was never clear. Some said it was about work documents. Some said it was about money. Some said it was just years of pent-up anger. But the result was tragic. At 12:38, 2 gunshots were heard. Alberta screamed. Marvin's brother, Frankie Gaye, who lived a few blocks away, called an ambulance. The police arrived within 3 minutes. Marvin Gaye was lying on the bedroom floor with 2 gunshot wounds to his chest. He was still breathing, but barely. The ambulance took him to California Hospital Medical Center. At 1:02 a.m., doctors pronounced him dead. Marvin Gaye died at the age of 44, killed by his father's bullets. Marvin Gaye Sr. was arrested by the police. In court, he said, "It was an accident. I didn't mean to kill my son." The prosecution charged him with first-degree murder, but defense attorneys argued brain tumor, insanity. Ultimately, Sr. was sentenced to 5 years of probation for involuntary manslaughter. He never served time. He died in 1998. Marvin Gaye's funeral was held in Los Angeles on April 5, 1984. Thousands of fans attended. Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, and Berry Gordy were there. "You're All I Need to Get By" was played at the funeral. The final farewell song to Tammy Terrell was now being played for Marvin himself. Berry Gordy gave a speech. Marvin was the greatest of his time. He had no musical equal. But the most painful words came from Marvin's sister Zeola. Addiction consumed him, but his relationship with his father killed him. Marvin's ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. The Sexual Healing Grammy Awards remained with his mother, Alberta. Alberta died of cancer 6 months after her son's death. The 2 Grammys are still in the family's possession. After Marvin Gaye's death, Sexual Healing became legendary. In 1999, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. In 2004, Rolling Stone ranked it number 231 on its list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. But the real legacy was in the Roland TR-808. The drum machine Marvin discovered in that Belgian studio became the foundation of hip-hop in the 1980s. Afrika Bambaataa used it on Planet Rock. Run DMC used it on all their albums. Kanye West made an entire album titled 808s and Heartbreak in 2008. Today, the 808 sound is one of the most recognizable sounds in modern music, and it all stemmed from Marvin Gaye's discovery on that winter day in 1982, in that small studio in Ostend while fleeing IRS, away from his father, struggling with cocaine. Sexual Healing wasn't just a song, it was a cry for salvation, and that cry continues to echo in the tears on the Grammy stage, in the electronic rhythms of the Roland TR-808, and in Marvin's tragic end. Marvin Gaye won 2 Grammys, but the price was his life.